Action Strikes is a cinematic orchestral powerhouse. And in this video, we're going to take an in-depth look at how Action Strikes actually works. So we'll go ahead and stop playback there. In this video, again, we're going to take a very in-depth look. We're going to check out all the different interfaces. There are 3 different NKIs here. The interfaces are a little bit different, and we'll go through everything and see exactly how it works. This video will be basically the same thing as reading the manual. Of course, it's better than the manual because you'll actually see what everything does. So Action Strikes, of course, is centered around percussion for cinematic scores, orchestral scores, anything like that. And the rhythms you hear in here, it's very important. These aren't loops. Okay, they're not audio loops. So what you hear is basically scripts running here in Kontakt in this instrument. Think of it like internal MIDI that's actually triggering separate hits, okay, for different instruments, different drums. Now that's important when it comes to changing our tempo, because that means we're on 120 BPM right now, right? If I change this to say 90, it's still going to sound just as good. No weird artifacts or anything like that. I can even take it down to say 20 if I want. Now, usually you couldn't do this with an audio loop without it sounding kind of weird. What about 220? Sure, why not? Okay. Let's put it back on 120. Action Strikes is a sample library for Kontakt. It's not an individual instrument. It runs in Kontakt, and obviously we have Kontakt pulled up here in Pro Tools. Kontakt, of course, will run in standalone as well. It will run in pretty much any DAW out there, VST, AU, and AAX. This is what it looks like. Hit your instruments there. We have our ensemble, our hits, and our instruments. We have all of those loaded up already. We'll take a look at them in order. So let's start up here at the top with the ensemble interface. The ensemble instrument is the largest of the included instruments. It includes 3 sections, low, mid, and high, that can be triggered individually or together, as well as a large collection of preset rhythms crafted for the big screen. Now, those rhythms, those come from hours and hours and hours of research and looking at the sort of rhythms that you hear in television, movies, for any kind of cinematic and orchestral score. And those rhythms are recreated here in Action Strikes. There are really, if you really listen to a lot of movie scores, a lot of the drum rhythms are very, very similar. One thing you might notice. So Action Strikes and our ensemble instrument here makes it really easy to quickly get a progression going here for your percussion. So let's start here at the bottom in this case. You can see these yellow keys. These yellow keys correspond to our different rhythms here. We can click them directly in the interface, obviously hit the keys on the keyboard or on my MIDI keyboard as such. And these blue keys in this lower area represent the full ensemble. So if I hold down C, for example, you can see all of these Cs are triggered at the same time. Okay? And that's playing this pattern right here, which we'll get to in a minute. The green keys are our single hits. Now let me bring up this I here so you can see this here in the mapping. So here's our rhythm, here's our mapping. So here's our rhythms that we're choosing. The yellow keys are, of course, clicking in here, your MIDI keyboard. This down here is the full ensemble. Next up is just the low section. So just that low drum playing through the same rhythm. So up here's the mid section, or the mid ensemble, playing just that mid section, and then the high section. All right, so if you want to play all those patterns at the same time on the same key, just hold down one down here, or of course draw it into your DAW, hold it down on your MIDI keyboard. So we can, of course, mix these up however we want. So if I wanted to hold down something here in the low area, maybe C, but I want to hold down D for the mid, which is a little bit of a different rhythm, as you can see here. We can do that very easily on my MIDI keyboard. So I have them C, then D for the mid, and then E for the high section. So you can sort of layer things up and get a bit of a different feel there if you want to play things in like that. You also have your single hits right here on your green keys. So if I play down here in this area, again, keep in mind, down here in this area is the full ensemble. So I trigger green key, all of those green keys play at the same time. If I want just the single hits, just come up here. Okay. So from there, we have our expression and our accent, so our mod wheel. If we pull our mod wheel down, we'll just play. And we'll pull it up. Just pulling that up with my keyboard there. For more of that expression. Same thing with our pitch. I can just pull that up here if I want, or down. Go to the rhythm, you can see these accents right here. Let me pull it down for now. You see that yellow flash every time it hits an accent. Now if I really want those to accent, I'll pull it up. You can of course do that with your pitch wheel on your keyboard for more of a live feel, or of course draw it into your DAW as well. Right now we're running the Dark City Ensemble. We have 12 different ones to choose from. If I chose something different here, I can basically change my sample sets, my instruments. And I'll go through these later on. That's just the low there. Different drums. Takios or Takios. Back to Dark City for now. And now let's come down here to this playback tab. We've been on the rhythm tab. We'll come back to that in just a second. Playback tab. So our trigger mode, right now we have this on phrase sync. We also have free trigger. So what phrase sync will do, and by the way, look down here in this gray area for information about all of these different items, okay? So phrase sync is going to automatically lock the newly played note into the current rhythm when it overlaps the previous note, so legato. So what that means is this. Look up here in this rhythm right up here. If I press a note, now I'm going to release and press another one. Of course, that's going to change and start from the beginning. But if I hold down the note, in this case C, and then I press D while I'm still holding down C, it's going to pick up the D progression right where I left off while I was holding down C. So I'll press down on D. So the progression changed and it just kept flowing through. It stayed in sync. If I had free trigger on and I hold down C, now I'm going to press D, it starts over. Okay. You can also see that. Let's put phrase sync back on. And now I'll change our rhythm type here using these notes. Okay. Now if I had this on free trigger, let me take it back here. And every time I switch, it's starting that rhythm from the beginning. All right. So if you want it to stay in sync, just use phrase sync and keep that note held down. That also applies whenever you're drawing this stuff into your DAW here. So we'll come here. Let's draw in a note. Let me go ahead and change this here to C1. Just draw this in here. And then if I want it to change, I could draw in a note here. And if this was not overlapping, it's going to start over. Okay. Let me squeeze this back a bit. And you'll see that it starts that rhythm from the beginning. And it starts over. But if instead I had this overlapping a bit like that, Now, whenever we play back, it will stay in sync. And it picked up right there, and it continued to play that new rhythm in sync. So that's what that means. It's back on clip. We come here. Let's get rid of it. So that is your trigger modes, either phrase, sync, or free trigger. Then we have feel. This is pretty self-explanatory. So we can have 16th swing, 50%, up to 70%. So now we'll go ahead and take it up. You get a bit of a different rhythm there. So of course, just adjust that to wherever you like it. Just the low section. That feels a bit different. Then we have our tempo. So this, of course, is relative to your DAW. Right now we have this on 120, so we can cut that in half within action strikes here. 1:1. So of course 120 or times 2. Okay, back to rhythm. Here in rhythm 1 to 5, we of course have 5 slots for 5 different patterns. Just hover over top of them to see those patterns. We also have another 5 slots here if you want to use the keys F1 to A1 to of course trigger those changes, just like our yellow keys down here. So if I wanted to load up another pattern, I can just click directly on that pattern and select one here, get an idea of it. I can filter things, 8ths, 16ths, triplets, and of course our resolution, whatever you want. Take the filter off. Let's just say 8ths, and maybe we'll just grab, let's go triplets here. And just choose your check mark. And there that is loaded up right there. And you see we got a new yellow note down here that we can now press to change that rhythm, that pattern that's going to correspond to what our blue notes here will play now. Right? Change back to C there. It doesn't switch my page for me, but we know that it's on rhythm 1 to 5 because we have our timer in there. Come back here, put that back on 1 to 1. And switch it back here. Now we're playing this user slot. Okay. So back to rhythm 1 to 5. So whenever you load up your rhythm sets, which is right here, we can click the search icon. And this is our rhythm sets. If we click something individual, an individual pattern, this is just rhythms. So we can change individual rhythms or entire sets of rhythms. So looking at our rhythm sets, basic, accent A, 16th feel, we can use our arrow keys, get different patterns in here now. Let's put this back on C. Maybe a next one here, next one, next. Also use your search there, and you can go through here and just select something. Again, use your filters if you want. Take this off. Let's just try that maybe. And that's going to load 5 different patterns in here. Whereas right now you can see 8th feel, accentuation 1. Here's accentuation 2. If I go to the next set, you can see these have different names. Not always, but sometimes. Next, again, you can see here different names because they're different patterns, because it again is a set. But if I don't like, let's say this one on C#1, I want to change just that one, I can click on it and swap it out for whatever I want. Say that one there. Just the low, just the mid, just the high. So again, come in here and add as many different patterns as you want. And of course, trigger those with your yellow keys or program them in your DAW, or obviously play them in with your keyboard. Now, before we move on to the ensemble and mixer, I want to note one thing. So whenever you're changing your patterns here versus playing them, getting your different accents, keep in mind that these yellow keys, or clicking here, these are triggers, meaning that when it comes to playing, you don't have to hold down this note. Just click it once and it will switch and it will stay on that pattern. Same thing when it comes to programming that in your DAW. So if you're programming in a switch between, C and D, I'm here to C1. So here's C1 right there. For this, I would just need basically one note there. And if I want to change that pattern on bar 2 to D, I just need one note to make that change. Pull that right there. But for our pattern, I would need a long note. So you would need to hold down that key, or of course, draw that in into your DAW. Back here, so I want maybe this pattern here. If I just have this pattern coming this far, and we play that back, it's going to stop. It's still switched to D, but nothing's playing in my DAW, okay? So I just wanted to note that whenever you're programming, you just need one little note to actually make your switches for your trigger there, and they will stay latched. But for your actual pattern, that needs to span the entire length that you want it to play, okay? So go for that pattern there, and then here, we'll have a different one right there. And we are overlapping it so that way it doesn't start from the beginning. So now it will switch. And it stayed in time too, because we have our phrase sync on. Okay, let's move on to our ensemble and mixer. Let's start off at the top here. All of these are labeled Dark City because that is our ensemble. Okay, right here's our low section, mid section, and high section. What these drop downs here do is they basically change the sample set for that area. So if I were to play just the low area here, okay, we can change those drums for just that low area there. We still have the same pattern. We still have Dark City up here and here. Okay, but we can change those around, mix and match however you want. So maybe heroic drums at the bottom. And then maybe we'll go for monster attack here in the midsection. Then for the high section, let's change that to license to drum. Now, whenever we make a change to any of these, you can see our ensemble changes to custom. So now that top end, the high section is different. And of course we can play the full ensemble here with different samples this time. But let's go ahead and I'll put this back on Dark City there. Okay, so then we have effects, reverb, stereo, delay, mic, level, and those controls are the same for each of our channels here. So let's just look here in the midsection because it's probably a bit easier to hear. We can, of course, pop up the reverb individually for just the midsection. All right, and that's a send effect, which we'll look at in just a second. So if you want a lot of reverb here, you can do that and say no reverb on the bottom. Very easy to do that here. Same thing for our stereo control. So if I make this really tight, all the way down to mono, or I can take it way up and make it very, very wide. So what I might want to do is add a bit of width to the mid, a lot of width to the top, and pull this lower end down to make it more focused in the middle so it doesn't get so muddy. Right? Control click, I'm on Windows, Command click on Mac, put those back to the center if you want. Of course, that's going to sound different than, right? Pull this low and down again. Just set that up however you want. That's your stereo control. On to delay. Again, we'll focus on the mid section here. It's probably the easiest to hear. If I turn that way up, we're not hearing anything. Well, that's for a couple reasons. Number one, we don't have any pulled in here of our delay fader into the master. We hear it now. Still nothing. That's because delay, just like reverb, is a send effect. So come over here to your send effects tab. We have delay and reverb. We can see reverb's already on. That's why we're hearing it. If reverb was off, and I can even jack this all the way up. Not hearing anything. We even have it pulled up here in the master. It's got to be on here in the send effects. Now if I turn it on, obviously huge. So control your send amount here for that exact instrument, and then the overall level of the reverb here. Of course, turn it on or off right there. And then you can also choose your type of reverb in here as well. So maybe a cathedral. We'll send a fair amount of that and mix it in around there. All right. And put this back to concert hall. And the same thing for delay. So for delay, basic controls, the time, the feedback, and then the damping for those high-end reflections. But to hear it, it's got to actually be turned on. Let me turn it down a bit for this middle channel. We'll flip it on. We'll hear it now because we have it again. We have it pulled in right here. I stop playing. You hear a little bit of it. Let's pull it way in now. So now we're getting those delays. You can almost create new rhythms by really pulling it up in there, adjusting your time. You can really pull more in here with your feedback. All right, I'm not even pressing down a note right now. It's still going. Still going. So adjust things in here however you want. And this damp will damp, again, those high-end reflections. Let me turn that off. That's getting annoying. But you could pull a good amount in here and create almost different rhythms. Make sure it's turned on. Turn down the feedback a bit there. The full ensemble. We get those really cool reflections. Right? Those there. Versus none. Right? So we're almost creating sort of a new pattern there with delay. You might not always think of using delay on something like drums or percussion. You may think of it more for something like vocals or guitar, other stringed instruments, the piano, things like that. But it's also very useful for percussion because it can create those really cool rhythms. But for now, let's go ahead and turn this down on all of these, and it's off. Then we have our level slider, which is just the volume for that exact channel. So if you want the middle section down, pull it down. It's going to be much quieter. You want more of that low end, pull the low section up. So of course the balance is now going to be a little bit different. That's pretty self-explanatory. Let me control click, put that back into the middle there. Then we have our mic. So close or room, or sort of right in the middle there. You can pull it all the way. Let me actually put it about here. So again, the middle section. And pull it down to close. Versus room. Much more of a roomy sound. So just adjust those to whatever sounds good for each of your different instruments. Then we have the master section. Pretty self-explanatory. Dial in the overall amount of reverb and delay, as we already saw, and of course the main output level that you want. Over here for our low section, mid section, and high section, we have the same 4 effects for each different section. Okay. So stay on the mid section for now. We have a filter, so a high pass and a low pass. If you don't know what that is, bring this up here. So here's our high pass and here's our low pass. So here's the low pass right here. So everything here on the top end is getting cut out, meaning it lets the lows pass. So it's cutting out top end. Opposite for our high pass, everything over here would be getting cut out and the highs would pass. So it's cutting out the lows. High pass cuts out lows, low pass cuts out highs. Just like that. Okay. And then the EQ, which we'll go ahead and show this here while we have it up. You have a 2-band EQ. The gain would be like this. So up or down, adding in, cutting out. Then your frequency, choose what frequency you want to center around. And then the tightness of the bandwidth. Very tight, very wide. And then choose the gain of that. All right, so that's a visual look at the EQ there. So our filter here, if I turn on the filter for the mid section here, you can just select the tab there. That's on here for the mid. Let's go up here. I can use that high pass, because the high pass lets the highs pass, or cutting out the low. So if it's too boomy, you can use this filter right here. If it's got too much harshness up top, you can pull that out. Or if you just want to do sort of an effect, then pull it back. All right. You can use that to shape the overall EQ curve. Again, for each section here. EQ, I already explained what that does. Just find the frequency. Maybe something's kind of boxy in, say, 370 or so. You might want to pull a little bit of that out and choose the bandwidth, either really tight or really wide, however you want that, and adjust it. Or pull some in. Yeah, I don't like that. I'd pull a little bit of that out. So just find the frequency, just the bandwidth and the gain. Same for your second band down here. Same exact thing. Now our transient designer. Flip that on. We can really emphasize the attack and or the sustain. So right now, sounds like that. We pull the attack down, softens that attack. I really accentuate the attack. Boom. Okay. And then same thing for the sustain, pull that way up. Or pull it down. Okay. So that's your transient designer, again, for each section here. Then you have a compressor to sort of level everything off. Turn it on, choose your threshold, how quickly you want to attack it. You're going to let those transients come through first and then attack sort of that tail end or that other portion of the transient, or you really want to grab it at a 0.1 millisecond there. Make it very long, add the release, put this back on the mid section, turn it on here, pull this like this here. Turn it off. So it just levels things out a bit. All right, so that is all of your effects in each of these sections. Turn them on or off, adjust the parameters however you want. Already looked at the synth effects. Then we have master effects. Same effects, except this, of course, is going to affect everything. All three of our channels, our low, our mid, and our high. Same thing, not going to go through it again. If you want... if there's too much low end or high end on the entire mix, you could use your filter here instead of trying to dial it out in each section. Same thing for the EQ. If there's something in the entire mix, just adjust that here instead of trying to do it, the same thing in each section. There's no reason to do that. Same thing for the overall transients. You want everything to be hitting harder. You can do that. Okay. Same for sustain and same thing for compression. Compression makes a little more sense here. You know, with everything all together, you can really level things out a bit more. Attack it. Yeah, that's good. Release it a bit slower, maybe. Just to level everything out. So that is everything here in the ensemble instrument of action strikes. Again, we can always change our ensemble here, which we'll do that towards the end. And we'll listen to some of the different ensembles. But now let's go ahead and move on to the hits instrument. So first thing you'll notice, interface is a bit different, although a lot of things are pretty self-explanatory now that you know the ensemble interface. But first look down here, you can see our keys are different. Always look in this gray area down here in Kontakt. If I highlight a key, we can see what hit that is. The hits instrument is the most simple of the Action Strikes instruments. It allows you to play the different sounds directly from your MIDI keyboard or DAW. It is most useful if you want to compose or perform your own percussive sequences rather than using preset rhythms. Okay, so if you want to come in here, you don't want to use the ensemble, you don't want to use the preset sounds, you want to make your own creation, load up hits, okay? Make whatever you want. So first up, our hit set. So right now we have big cinematic hits. We can change this around to whatever we want. So here's modern percussion. Let that load up. And of course, again, down here, we have different hits, different drums. Cinematic toms. Let's go back to big cinematic hits for now. We still have our expression, okay? Same thing applies that it did previously. Pull it up. And of course, play that in live with your MIDI keyboard or program it in your DAW. You have your title right here. Same thing for up here for your hit sets. So hit selection, whatever we choose down here, we'll update down here as long as we have the auto follow input. If that's off, we hit a key anywhere, either in here or on my keyboard, it's not going to change. You probably want that on most of the time. And as you can see, these hit settings change depending on the drum. So you can just set this up however you want. You have basic settings, volume, pan, tune, and mic. So if we have this drum here, if I want it quieter, do that here. If I want it panned, do that here. If I want it tuned down, do that here. If I want the mic close versus the room, do that here. And of course, once I go to the next hit, I can set that up differently. Okay, so pan that one this way, tune this one up. Okay, control click, center those out if you want to center them out. So that's basically all you have here. We still have the effects, but before we get to that, you can also use your arrows here to switch your hit sets, or you can come up here and switch your hit sets, or as we already showed, use the drop down. This is cymbals. Let me change this over to big cinematic hits. And then we'll come down here to our effects. Pretty simple stuff here too. So under sound, we have a master EQ. When it's off, it's just a flat response. Setting number 1. Now we don't get to adjust these settings. They're just preset. So setting number 1 is going to end up boosting your high end. Setting number 2 dips the mids and boosts the low end and the high end. Then we have our dynamics to pump it. Sort of like compression here. It's actually a combination of envelope and compression processing to make the output signals sound louder and fatter. So hear this now. Boom. Turn it back off. Change our EQ to flat. Pull this down because I want you to hear it without clipping. Put the pump back on. Bit fuller, right? And these settings affect everything. It's not per hit, it's everything. So turn that on or off, turn your EQ on or off to whatever you prefer. And then reverb, simple stuff, on or off, that switch, choose your type in here, and then the amount. That's all there is to it. Want more? There you go. Of course, change the type. We can use these arrows as well. So that's it for the hits instrument. Again, if you want to make your own progressions, your own scores without using the presets or the preset patterns, which by the way are already time tested, so there's really no reason not to use them. But if there's something you want to program in, you probably want to pull up the hits first. Okay, if of course the Ensemble isn't doing it for you. So now let's move on to the last one, the instruments. We already have that loaded up down here. The Instruments NKI can be considered a simplified version of the Ensemble NKI or a hybrid of the Ensemble and hits instruments. You can use it to load an ensemble section, or single instrument, and then play a selection of rhythmic patterns and single hits. Okay, so the interface, somewhat similar. We have our expression here for our mod wheel and our pitch wheel in this case. We already saw that, so I'm not going to go over it again. You already know what that does. You have the instrument up here. You can click in here and select different instruments, filtered by section, and of course single or ensemble. Of course, use your check mark to accept that. You can also use your arrow keys here. Same thing for right here. So if I switch here, it's going to switch up here as well. Look down here at our keys. You can see our yellow keys are our single hits. Green is the effects range, which let me pull this up here so we can actually see this. So rolls and flams. Basic rhythm loops here. This is just our Takio drums there. And the accent rhythms, the rhythm loops up here. Switch that if we want. Put this on the playback tab. And we have the giant drums, same thing here. Single hits there. Flams there. Basic rhythms. Accent rhythms. Might want to use your accent here to really accent those. Or not quite as much. And here in the playback tab, same stuff we already saw, so I'm not gonna go over it again. We already know what phrase sync does, and we already know what free trigger does. We already know. So if I'm playing a loop in this case, I keep it held down. I'll trigger another one. Okay. It triggers that one and keeps it in sync. Whereas if I'm holding it down, I release, I play something else, it's going to start from the beginning. Same thing if I just did a free trigger here. No matter when I press down, it starts from the beginning. Okay. So if you don't know what that means, just go to the front of the video there and see how we did that with the ensembles. It's literally the same thing. Same thing also for our feel. Pull that up or down. Dial it in to taste. And same thing that we already know for tempo. half, 1-to-1, or times 2. Slower or faster. Okay. On to the effects. Very simple here. Sound. So master EQ, same thing. Off or boost the highs. And 2 to boost the highs and the lows and cut out the mids there. We have a filter on this one here. This is a bandpass filter. You can hear what we're cutting out. You see the hertz there? But pull it down towards the low end. Okay, turn that on or off. Mic position, same thing, except this time we have a slider. Close or room. To room. Put it somewhere around there. And then reverb. Switch it on, choose your type, and the amount. All there is to it. Okay, and that is action strikes. That's everything you really need to know. So for the rest of this, I'm just going to sort of play around with the sounds a bit. So what do you say we just stick on instruments for now? Let's head in here. Find a mid section, or maybe go for ensemble and say this here. Click, get an idea. Once you find something, just choose your check mark there. And of course, we have our single hits down here. Rolls and flams there. Basic loops there. Accent rhythms there. Of course, we can step through like this as well. Make sure that's on there. Switch it again. It's a heartbeat drum. Click up here, midsection, go to single, Indian drum there. Take that to half. Really accent it if you want. Also click this search icon there, or come up here as well. Take off single, take off low section. Click and just listen. Not going to go through all of them, but you can get an idea what's included here. Big Tom 2. Let me go back to this here. Snare, even shakers, crasher, tambourine. A lot of Takio drums here. Takio drums are great for cinematic, orchestral kind of stuff. You hear a lot of that in cinematic music. You have a full selection here. The djembe. Okay, that's enough for the instrument here in Kontakt for action strikes. Let's move up to the hits. Put that on solo. And remember our hit sets. So we can switch those here or down here. Again, this is the hits. Switch it up. Bunch of orchestral percussion there. Next one, organ. Use your drop down, choose whatever you want. I'm just going to run through these real quick so you can get an idea of what they do. Again, remember you have the effects section that you can actually go ahead and let's turn that on, I guess. The pump and the EQ that you can mess with as well. You could, if you wanted to, switch through your instruments up here and then make adjustments, although it doesn't make much sense. If you don't know, if you don't know what you're on, you probably want to hear it. So have that on, trigger it, and then make your adjustment. Cinematic toms. All the Takios drums. Run through all those pretty quick. Mystic percussion. Sound effects percussion here. All right, that's almost all of them. One more. All right, I think that's all of those. Again, you could have several of these hits instruments loaded up here into Kontakt, and of course route them properly, and then play the correct notes and make up your song using just the hits instead of using, you know, your patterns. All right. And last, back up to the biggest one of these here. Put that on solo. The Ensemble. Let's go through some of these other drums for heroic drums here. Let's change this too. Just that low section, the mid, of course, that high. Of course, you have your single hits in there too, if you want to mess with those. Next set here. Change that too. Here's an ending phrase. So I'll play that in. Okay. Again, on playback, I have that phrase sync, so it keeps those patterns in sync for me there. Should put that on rhythm whenever I play that back. Next set here, Rise of the Machines. This is a pretty cool one. Let's switch this up. Let's go to 16ths. Grab that, I think. Let's change the pattern I'm triggering there. Put it up there. Rise of the Machines. What is the next one here? Colossus Drums. Of course, you have your mixer here, so you can mix things in. Don't forget that. Maybe some delay on some of this would be kind of cool. Make sure it's turned on. Gives it a bit of a marching feel now. We could tighten that up a little bit there. Widen this out here. Less reverb on that, less on this too, more on this here. And a little closer on this drum, I think. Maybe more room up here. Do some delay on that. Yeah, try that. Marching toward you there. Switch the drums again. course, don't forget, load up into your user slots, select something and it will play. Again, this is loading up single rhythms versus coming up here, right, and loading your rhythm sets. So a set is, of course, the full set. These single rhythms are just these single rhythms. Next one here, Monster Attack. More Ensemble. Let's change this up to the full thing. Next one up here. Couple more. License to drum. Let's head in here now. Take this off of the filter there. Let's go for some odd rhythms. The whole set. Blockbuster, our last one here. Let's change this while we're at it. That's the individual ending right down there. Just pop in here. Check out all of your different sets. And once again, if you want to change just the individual rhythms, click right down here. You can head in here and find what you want. So here's an ending right here. Take triplets off there. A lot of patterns in here. All right. Once again, you can buy it on its own, but it's much better to buy it as part of the complete Ultimate Bundle. So that is Native Instruments Action Strikes.